Joining me now from Washington, CBS News senior political editor Steve Chaggaris and Washington Post political reporter Amber Phillips. Okay, Amber, to you first. Senator Sessions, he's got to be approved by majority in the Senate to be confirmed. But are there any early signs that might indicate that there could be trouble?
Well, let me first say that senators often tend to give deference to their fellow colleagues when they come up for jobs like this. But this is a unique time in American politics, right? And the indications I've seen is that largely Senate Republicans are saying Jeff Sessions is great, good pick, Donald Trump, we like him, including key top Republicans on the Senate committee that would approve him. Senate Democrats are kind of keeping their options open. I think they're trying to decide whether or not they want to take a stand against Jeff Sessions and therefore Donald Trump early on. Of the comments I've heard, they're saying, we've been happy to work with Jeff Sessions in the Senate, but he better know we're going to investigate everything very, very thoroughly. Kind of leaving their options open there for what tack they want to take.
That's interesting. I want to ask you, though, Steve, Senator Sessions was denied at one point a federal judgeship by the Republican-controlled Senate Judiciary Committee. I mean, this was a while back. It was back in 1986, but it was because of racially charged comments. The late Senator Ed Kennedy, he said this during a hearing, that Mr. Sessions is, quote, a throwback to a shameful era which I know both black and white Americans thought was in our past. Could those words of late Senator Ed Kennedy come back to haunt him? Ted Kennedy come back to haunt him?
I mean, I think he's going to have to answer those questions again in any kind of confirmation hearing. I think Democrats are going to bring up those issues again, and he's going to have to address it. He's going to be in charge of civil rights related things as Attorney General. And there's no question that Democrats at some point, maybe they won't totally oppose him, but they're going to raise questions about civil rights issues, racism or allegations of racism, and they'll ask questions about immigration. No question. This is a man, Sessions, who immigration reformers, he's one of their top enemies. He's not a fan of immigration reform. He was backing Donald Trump's call for a wall. And so I think those are the kinds of issues you'll see Democrats bring up. And I'd be shocked if the 1986 stuff doesn't come up in confirmation hearings, at least from Democrats.
Amber, we know Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, he's been tapped for National Security Advisor. That's actually a position that doesn't require congressional approval. And last year, there's some rumor buzzing about his business engagements, because last year he was actually accepted a speaking engagement with the Kremlin-funded TV network Russia Today. He attended it, and the network's party in Moscow, where Russian President Vladimir Putin was actually present. We also know that he's got close ties, a business dealing with Erdogan in Turkey. So does this raise potential conflict of interest here?
Yeah, I think if you're a Senate Democrat, or if you're any Democrat, because as you mentioned, this Michael Flynn doesn't need to get approved by Congress, this would send, a shiver of concern that Trump is picking people who have sort of agreed with him that America needs to work more with Russia. Trump throughout the campaign notably refused to criticize Russian President Vladimir Putin. The last presidential Republican nominee we had said Russia is, our #1 geopolitical foe. That's a quote from Mitt Romney right there. And so I think that Flynn has these ties, whether they're directly connected or not, but some kind of ties to Russia and some people that American foreign policy hawks here, like I'd include Senator John McCain in that, find people that to be reprehensible, that America shouldn't be working with, raises questions about him. But as you said, there's not a lot Congress can do right now about him. I think we'll have to let that play out, let him get into his job and see how he handles those potential conflicts of interest.
Steve, Flynn has also received fierce criticism for calling Islam, quote, a political ideology that hides behind a religion. He's also praised the recent crackdown on Turkey on critics of President Erdogan, which, as I mentioned, he has business dealings with people associated with him. So what type of narrative is this setting up for Trump's future administration?
Well, I think what we're seeing with all three of these picks is you have three people who are agreeing with Donald Trump on the idea of taking a hard line against ISIS and Islamic terrorism, as they like to call it, a radical Islamic terrorism, as they call it. And so Flynn really is a person, again, as we mentioned, does not need Senate confirmation, and he'll be in Trump's inner circle dealing with these issues about how to deal with terrorism. And so it's sending the message that they feel that the Obama administration, to use Donald Trump's word, has been weak on this, and they are going to take a much more aggressive view and stance on how to deal with terrorism.
Amber, the president-elect has called for unity, but based on some of the picks he's putting into his cabinet to these administrative positions, some people have been criticized for using racially charged language. So does this kind of upset those efforts?
Right. I think this all has to be viewed under the umbrella of Steve Bannon. That is, of course, will be Trump's top aide in the White House, one of his top aides, the former head of Breitbart News, which critics say has become a forum for white nationalism. With Trump announcing Bannon as one of his most inner circle guys, we saw Democrats last week and civil rights groups basically demand Trump to denounce this guy, get rid of him before we will be able to work with you. And I think when you consider all of Trump's nominations on Friday today, under the umbrella of Bannon, you can see a trend, or if you're, especially critics of Trump administration, can see a trend that he's not willing to compromise on that. He's not willing to back off some of the more inflammatory comments and proposals he made during the campaign. In fact, he wants to bring people who agree with those comments into his inner circle.
Steve, I want to ask you before we go about Congressman Mike Pompeo. He's been selected to lead the CIA. What's been the reaction by his colleagues in Washington to the appointment?
Fairly positive, actually, to this point. But there's one thing in his background I think is going to be very interesting to watch in terms of Senate confirmation. He's a big supporter of the NSA surveillance program, which Senator Rand Paul was not. And if you're looking for Republicans who might be in opposition to a Trump nominee, there might be some friction there, and I'm really interested to see how that goes through the nomination process, to see if he loses any Republican supporters because of his stance on NSA.
Steve Chaggaris and Amber Phillips, thank you both for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks.